Olivia Stiles joins us now from La Paz. She's an academic researcher focusing on politics and indigenous movements in Bolivia. Olivia, thanks for joining us on the program. Morales was in power for 14 years, so how did it come down to this with him resigning?
Yes, well, there's a long story and a short story. So in the past 2 weeks, we've seen a huge mobilization of ultra-right forces, and particularly from the city of Santa Cruz in Bolivia. We've also seen a mass mobilization of particularly urban middle-class movements in cities across the country. Now, these movements have come out to protest what they saw as fraud in the elections on October the 20th. On October the 20th, Morales apparently won the presidential election at the first round. This was disputed by many movements. There were many accusations of fraud, but it was really on Sunday, yesterday, when the Organization of American States, the OAS, released a report which identified manipulation. This has also, however, been contested by other think tanks, notably the Center for Economic and Policy Research, which has disputed that there was large-scale fraud. So that's the short story.
Okay.
There is a much longer story, which goes back to 2016, when Morales refused, or he defied the results of a referendum, which said that he should not run for a fourth term. It was prohibited under the Constitution. He took this to the Supreme Court, who ruled that he could indeed run. However, so since then there have been a lot of popular opposition to Morales running for this fourth term.
So with Morales's resignation, well, the big question is who's in power now, because there have also been resignations at high levels in the government. So, I mean, what happens next?
Well, that's a good question. As you say, we've seen mass resignations. The vice president's also resigned, the head of the Senate. So at the moment, it's looking like it will actually be an opposition senator, Janine Áñez, who will be filling this vacuum. This is despite the fact the mass, as from the elections on the 20th of October, has a majority in the legislature. So the other thing to note is that Morales had, in response to the report from the OAS, which I mentioned, Morales had called for new elections. However, it was at the point when the army, the head of the Bolivian armed forces, called for Morales to resign, that Morales then promptly resigned, leading many to call this a military coup.
So we have seen these protesters out on the streets for weeks now, but then we saw the protests turn to celebrations when Morales announced his resignation. Is that the end for the protests then? Have their demands been met by his resignation?
Well, it should also be pointed out that there have been massive protests by pro-Morales forces as well. I'm in La Paz right now. We've had daily protests from land workers, from miners, who have come in from outside of the city to protest and to support President Morales. So I do not think that and right now there have been, last night in El Alto, the city bordering La Paz, there were protests against what is seen as a coup. So I don't think this is the end for mobilization in Bolivia, certainly not from pro-mass sectors. In La Paz this morning, last night there was a wave of violence. Bus stations were burnt down. Shops have been there've been footage which suggests shops have been looted in parts of the city. So I strongly suspect that this is not the end of the story.
All right, Olivia Stiles in La Paz. Thank you, Olivia.